Pivoting in basketball is where you keep one foot on the ground and yet you can still move and change the direction you are looking simply by moving the other foot. It's called the pivot. Likewise, in our personal lives, when we pivot, we're moving the direction we are heading into a new direction. The ability to pivot is extremely challenging and at times. Welcome back to episode 77 of Defeating Weekly. I'm your host, Craig Olson. Thank you for tuning in. Please feel free to share. This week's episode is on the topic of pivoting. Yes, just like that Friends episode, pivot, but slightly different. So I want you to think back to a time in your life when you felt stuck. You kept trying to do something over and over and still couldn't get it. Maybe you've had a job that just didn't feel right, and no matter what you did at that job, you just couldn't make it work. Or maybe a relationship you were in and it just didn't seem quite right. We've all had something in our lives that we knew just wasn't the path we were intended to be on. For me, one of the main ones that pops into my head is what happened after my junior year of college and when I was playing for North Dakota State University's baseball team. It hadn't been my greatest year, and while I still loved the game, I just had this feeling that it wasn't right for me to continue playing. So I pivoted my focus and found a new focal point, which was studying more and beginning to have a job versus having baseball take all my time. Pivoting in basketball is where you keep one foot on the ground and yet you can still move and change the direction you are looking simply by moving the other foot. It's called the pivot. Likewise, in our personal lives, when we pivot, we're moving the direction we are heading into a new direction. The ability to pivot is extremely challenging, and at times we often feel like a new direction is full of unknowns and can be quite scary. While this is true, if we're feeling stuck and are in need of a pivot, what is worse, being stuck in something that is difficult over and over and over again, or being able to move forward and pivot into a new situation that may actually be exactly what you are looking for, even if you didn't know it at the time? For me, when I stopped playing baseball, I had a strong feeling that God had a new plan for me outside of baseball. So I trusted this. It wasn't the easiest decision. Little did I know, though, it was to help prepare me for the next journey and being able to be there for Rachel. If I hadn't quit baseball and trusted God's decision and pivoted my direction, it's very possible that I actually would have been at baseball practice on the day that Rachel had her initial seizures. And who knows how long it would have been before I'd got there and found her. While I may come across as saying, making it seem like it's a pretty easy decision just to pivot and move on, such as me with baseball, it's not. For me, I spent days and weeks even trying to figure out, do I keep playing baseball or do I pivot and go into something new? And honestly, I'm glad I made the choice I did. So, action steps for you this week. Number one, examine your life and see if there's an area that you are currently in need of a pivot. If so, what is the driving force behind this? Make sure it's a legitimate reason, especially if it's like a job or something. Don't just be feeling like you need to pivot simply because you don't like working. You need to go more in depth with that. Step two, as you prepare to pivot, make sure you have at least a general idea of where you're planning on going or what you're planning on doing. It needs to be very basic. Don't be going into the deep specifics if you don't feel like you want to. If you're getting out of a relationship, for instance, just think about what you want from getting out of that relationship. Visualize yourself in that new situation that you want with your pivot. You need to have an idea of what you're wanting. And then finally, act on your pivot. Once you know what it is you want to do, act. Don't wait and him and haw over it and kind of talk yourself out of it. Figure it out, pivot, get it done. This week's quote: pivoting is not the end of the disruption process, but the beginning of the next leg of your journey. That's by Jay Samit. Yes, when we pivot, it's a new journey, but you have the backwards knowledge of where you came from and the reasoning why you are pivoting. So I please ask if you are enjoying this, please share it with someone else. As always, I hope you guys have a great day and defeat the week.